Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the island that we have in the middle of our dam. This is our floating island. We made it quite a few years ago now, and it's been floating on the dam, moored to the middle of the dam with an anchor and a long rope. Long enough so that it could float about in the middle, but not so long that it would go to the edge and get stuck on the bottom. Paul had a couple of sailboards hanging up in the shed that he hadn't used for years. After researching a few other floating islands, we decided to use the sailboards as a basis for ours. We tied the sailboards in a V together with nylon rope and a couple of poles. Then we put an old trampoline net over the top of the whole lot and used some more nylon rope to secure it. So basically it's a triangular shape. The moisture crept through the bottom of the trampoline net. This meant that water-loving plants had a continual water source and thrived. But not just the plants you want to thrive, there was quite a few weeds on it as well. Being anchored to the middle of the dam meant that you needed a boat or to go out swimming to actually do maintenance, so we had to have a rethink. Last weekend we decided to use another method to secure the floating island. Keep watching and I'll explain the steps as we go along. We used strong, thin stainless steel cable. Paul connected a heavy piece of metal to a string line. Then he unrolled the string line so there was plenty of slack, and then threw the heavy piece of metal over to the other side of the dam, making sure not to let go of the other end of the string line. Then he walked around to the other side of the dam and attached thin cable to it so that he could pull the thin cable across with the string line. He anchored the other end of the cable before he pulled it across so it wouldn't fall into the dam. It's always better not to have joins, but we did have to join it in a couple of places, and this is how Paul did it. With that long piece of cable sitting on this side of the bank, the next step was to bring the floating island over. I'm glad Paul volunteered because the water was still quite cold. Once he was ready, he had to go into the water and swim over to the floating island and disconnect the original anchor. I think Paul's very brave because last summer we saw a red-bellied black snake swim over to the island to have a look around. I really don't think I'd like to risk coming face to face with a red-bellied black snake. What do you think? Once we got the floating island to the edge of the dam, we connected two pieces of cable to it. The original one that came from the other side of the dam and another shorter piece of cable that came from this side of the dam. If you're getting a bit confused, here's a little diagram of what we actually set out to do. We needed two separate lengths of cable. One length was a bit more than the total width of the dam. So normally when the island was in the middle of the dam, the excess length of the longer cable would be rolled up. The other length of cable was roughly half of that. We put the shorter length of cable on this side because there are steps there and it makes it easier for us to get onto the island when we're doing maintenance. Once you're finished doing all that you need to do with the island, you can then pull it back into position in the middle and roll up that excessive length of cable again and secure it. Here's the floating island again with the two cables. Originally, I only planted a few water plants on the island. All these other plants have just colonised by themselves. I actually built this very crude duck shelter. It's done the job though, because the ducks have had quite a few clutches of ducklings. Now the cables were in place, it was time to revamp Duck Island a little bit while it was on the shore. I carefully painted those Scotch thistles with a little bit of poison. They only needed the smallest amount, and it's best to get rid of them before they seed all over the place. I collected a few water-loving plants from around the garden. These are Spira irises. They'll grow tall and have pretty flowers on the top. I'm fairly sure they'll either be blue or yellow, but either would be fine. These are Japanese water irises out of one of my other ponds. And another. These are very wintered cannas, but they'll have lovely green leaves with pink flowers like this. These are quite frost damaged at the moment, but they love the water and they'll come good once the weather warms up. Here's another variety of canna too in the bottom of the wheelbarrow. It's got the burgundy leaves and the bright orange, sometimes red flowers in the summer. These grow quite tall too, and there'll be definitely something to look forward to. I also put some of this obedient plant on the island as well. It's related to the mint family, but not very fragrant, but the flowers are quite pretty, being mauve bell sort of flowers. Once we put the plants in, it was time to put the island back in the centre of the dam. Paul went over to the other side of the dam and gently pulled on the long cable. I held on to the short cable just to make sure it didn't go into the dam. Once we were happy with the position of the island, we moored both ends of the cable on respective sides of the dam to a star picket that had been hammered in. For now, we've just left the long length of cable in a neat bundle. Paul's intending to get some sort of a reel now so that the bundle doesn't get tangled. It'll also make it easier for us to unloop it for when we want to send the island to the other side for maintenance. Perhaps a bit like a large fishing reel. Here's another closer look at the island with all the new plantings. I can't wait till they establish themselves, and I'll make sure I do another video. If you subscribe, you'll see what it looks like in the coming months. Thanks for joining us here today at Itchy Palms Gardens on another garden adventure. It's always nice to show people what we've been doing, and I hope it has given you some inspiration to make your very own floating island.